Most people don't think of strategy that way.
Developing a new strategy.
Strategic blind spots.
When strategy meets reality.
Strategy and innovations.
In the strategy world.
Drive their strategic goals.
And welcome back to Strategy Meets Reality podcast. Welcome back to Strategy Meets Reality podcast. I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Sarah Kernion. I pronounced that right?
That is, yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Happy days.
French roots. You can do the Kernion if you'd really like to, but Kernion works.
Well, I do think I'm that posh, but we'll try. It's great to have you on. Just to give our viewers an insight to you and how come you're on this podcast, please give a bit of background and context about what you've been up to lately.
Sure. I'm Sarah Kernion. I'm a mother, first and foremost, and 2 of my 3 children have profound non-speaking autism. I began my advocacy journey simply as a mommy blogger influencer in that space of social media where the connectivity around shared journey in a role that none of us as humans even think will be on our bingo card. Right. And having 2 children, not just one, but 2 children, a boy and a girl with a profound disability radically changes that life trajectory. And I founded Inchstones because I felt too many mothers and caregivers are so unconsciously trained to think, to accept less, to explain less, ask for less, and expect less from their own lives. Inchstones and how I lived and live and continue to do so within the constraints of my children's behaviors is always to shatter that assumption and to shatter that conditioning and to challenge the assumptions that people make about my children, intelligence, potential, worth, humanity, as a way to reveal and to be a mirror, to challenge our own capacity to lead, to advocate, to adapt, and to build systems within companies. And my system is life. My system is my family. But that translates so deeply into the corporate world and corporate America with the ability to sort of, when we replace fear with clarity and strategy and possibility, there's insane amounts of growth that can happen to one's orientation.
Yeah. And that's what I'd really like to pick up on, because reading your stuff on Substack, you wouldn't naturally link, a mother's journey and, involvement of her identity through 2 profound autistic kids and strategy. But and I know you haven't been, I say, classically trained, I suppose, as most of us in the military have been trained and, brought up on John Boyd's work.
Right.
You have an intuition for it, and an intuition that's gained not necessarily reading the text first, but from experiencing it first, and then I suppose finding it afterwards. Is that sort of?
Yeah,
right?
it's absolutely. Like, I was unaware of the work of John Boyd up until a number, like maybe 3 years ago at this point. And when it was revealed to me that the OODA loop sketch, the actual dynamic sketch of John Boyd's work, was how I was living and challenging the assumptions of what a special needs mother is to be and to do once her children get a lifelong diagnosis. It reminded me that I am my own dynamic model for learning and adaptation. And it reminds me constantly that my orientation is the most powerful tool as a mother. Mothers are the primary attachment of any child, right?
Yes.
You can't divorce that. And so in understanding that I had the ability to not only by default be the driver of reorienting to this life, I also knew that I was a mirror to show what deep of a mismatch my choices are in reorienting versus what society sort of clandestinely serves women and mothers about a journey into motherhood that is not typical. And most specifically about the work of John Boyd is his paper on destruction and creation, and the sort of outdated misconceptions and assumptions and these metrics about what life is supposed to look like, how we're supposed to look, what kind of role we're supposed to play as the, leader who is just one meltdown away from their own meltdown, the mother who is unkept, depressed, riled up because at every turn it's a struggle. And when you choose to not let those adjectives define you and become integrated in your system, you actually end up becoming a meaningful innovator in a space that's sometimes unprepared for it, right? I just wrote a piece that launched this morning about I get a lot of confused looks when I'm at events for small business entrepreneurs or out, just at any networking events, because when you hear a person say that, tell me who you are, what's your mission? And I say, I'm Sarah, I have 2 children with profound non-speaking autism. A lot of the glance is, how are you here? Like, how are
Yeah,
you
yeah,
living?
yeah,
How
yeah.
are you even here? Because we've been trained to think that the isolation is part of what the diagnosis carries, and it isn't.
Yeah. But
Now, don't get me
that's the
wrong,
whole.
and that's the whole point.
Yeah, but that's what you were saying earlier. What you said, that sentence really strikes the heart of it, which is that you're in control of your own orientation,
Yes.
and I think this is the problem, that orientation and your identity limit what you can see.
Yes.
So when you're being told that just because of this, these norms or these perceived constraints that are put in place, they start to define you as a person and they
Right.
limit your identity. Where actually, if you can say, no, let's reorientate, let's destroy that narrative, these assumptions and those perceived constraints, and rebuild my own orientation to what is possible.
Correct.
That's
There's this, yes, in the orientation of recognizing that so much of our orientation is sold or handed or embedded and baked into our cells of our body so unconsciously that
Mm,
the acceptance of the discomfort that it takes to reorient in a way is going to be so freeing. It's also going to be very, very hard. It's not going to be comfortable. And I always say that that's the trade-off in all of this. It's not that this is going to be easy and that you're going to have this aha moment of, well, I can fly to Hong Kong tomorrow with my children with profound autism. Now I can, if
yeah.
you said to me, Mike, Sarah, I've got 2 basic economy tickets and you and Millie have to get to, I don't know, the Holiday Inn in Hong Kong for a week-long trip. That doesn't scare me, right? That there's no fear that I have in doing that. In fact, that sounds wonderful. Like, I love the idea,
Mm,
the impulsivity of that. I also know that what a sentence like that holds for many women and mothers and caregivers in my similar situation is, that's impossible. I can't do that. Well,
yeah.
you can. There's going to be a ton of trade-offs and a ton of constraints based on what your orientation is to your life and your children. Why is it so difficult? The brick walls that have been put up by other women and mothers in my situation are false narratives.
Yeah,
And it's
because
baked into what society has always just chosen to do.
yeah, and like you said, because even I've got a very naive view of this, because I don't really know anyone other than yourself, and we've had a few conversations now, in your situation. But you talk about the social narratives and stuff, but I just assume, and this is my assumption, my orientation of it is that most people say, oh yeah, you're going to fly to Hong Kong tomorrow. The thing is that their life must be about order, structure, routine, and it's like almost a sacred cow that you cannot break those routines,
Right.
otherwise hell ensues. But you're looking at a different way and saying, actually, we can adapt. We just need to reorientate and understand what the trade-offs by these decisions are.
Because the powerful edge in not isolating, I use the trip to Hong Kong as a very obviously ridiculously massive
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
For some, let's even say it's going to a new grocery store, right? What I know for sure is this: my son needs to have certain fidgets or a certain sense of sensory connectivity to me. So he at 8 years old is still going to hold onto the handles and put his feet on the bottom part of the cart. And I sort of lean into him and cage him in there as we go through the store, right?
Mm.
He's likely going to be loud if something funny comes on his device that he loves. He might be laughing. What I'm doing by interacting is allowing the world to see him, be visible to him, allowing them to learn, adjust, and build and develop a powerful edge that I already have, which is this is the reality of my child and my role as their mother. The adaptive nature of what society will take from me being involved in society is on society to do. And I know that that's a deep cost to mothers in my own similar situation. And that's the work that I'm trying to do, is to say, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying that it will continue to grow your own confidence in interacting with the world that sees you as only being a martyr, unkempt, exhausted, one small behavior away from your own 72-hour psych ward hold, right? And that's just not the case. But there's so many narratives around that you don't even realize are happening. I wrote an article recently about a major global organization that, if you remember from, I guess, about 6-7 months ago, there was a whole movement online that you could turn your life and body into like a action figure doll. Did you see that? So Mike Jones, and you input all these things about you, and they seal you in plastic with your little accoutrements. And this publication in the autism world, published the autism mom doll. And she's, unkempt, bags under her eyes, smeared mascara, hair all over the place, bags spilling over, coffee on her shirt. And yes, that is that's any human on any given day.
Yeah.
But what I keep trying to reveal is like the ground underneath that is that if you are not an autism parent, you are being sold that is what every autism parent is. You are being sold that any mismatch to that is, wow, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah. Ooh.
Well, I think the reorientation to what is possible is not withheld from any of us.
Yeah. That's like, I wrote today, really, it came out today, about, are you being shaped or are you shaping? And it's the realization about, first we need to understand what's shaping us.
That's
and
right.
Then, what's happening, because we are structurally coupled with the environment, and changes the environment will change us, and vice versa. But a lot of people don't realize that they are being shaped by these things, be it expectations, norms. All this stuff is really important to
And
realize.
that's why the OODA loop sketch and the dynamicism of it, and it always being updated and evolving, struck a chord so deeply, because I was like, yes, I actually, again, before even knowing about that, I was doing that. I was constantly updating my own orientation, realizing where my nuances and expectations lied within my orientation, and simply was shattering them because I did not accept anything less than what I knew, and didn't align I think that we live in a time right now where identity politics is so ripe and full of fervor that I was not going to let the identity of being a mother of children with profound autism become the cross that I bear, right? I'm simply Sarah, a woman, full stop.
And and that's the really crucial thing, because you've done a lot, and you've come a long way, and from, we've had a previous conversation about Sarah previous life to this life, and there's a whole paradigm shift in that alone. Someone could naively listen to this conversation and think there's a nice linear path for you, you had it, but it's really about the orientation, and you seeing possibilities. You took those possibilities, you learned new capabilities, new skills, new ways, and then you practice those, which then created more options.
That's right.
And it's not a linear path. It's that learning and adaptation that I think people won't necessarily see at surface level.
Yes, because it's so small, and it's so nuanced, and it's so minuscule in comparison to what strides look like as an adult living in this world. And I think, the reason why Inchstones became my brand and my title and my, almost my hashtag Inchstones, was that the moment, and I'm talking a father and a mother, the moment that you have a child birthed into this world and you go to the pediatrician day one after getting home from the hospital, the word milestone is immediately placed in your vocabulary. Now you're unaware of it because, of course, you want your child to grow and develop. That's like baked into being a parent, because the desire for your child is to become a full functioning, independent human being with their own choices and decisions that they can make for themselves. I realized quickly after, and I have a typical 13-year-old, so I had the typically developing and have the typically developing child. When that milestone was not being reached by my second and then third child, yet I was finding joy in their development that was so much smaller and worthy of recognizing. That's where Inchstones became the mindset of mine.
Like it.
Was
Yeah.
there was still joy to be found. There was still growth within their development. It just simply did not look like what anyone was going to recognize and project onto me what they thought that I needed to have. And I think that's where the questioning and the reorientation and destroying this mental model became so obvious to me. And I know that this is why it's my life's mission, because I realized that I'm in a unique position to speak this from a position of I didn't know any other way to do it but the way I am doing it. And then when I realized that others weren't, I went, whoa,
Yeah.
this is not about me. It's not about me sharing anything about getting a massage one day or getting my nails done or, blow drying my hair. This is actually about holding up a mirror to have others go, wait, I could have the fullness and breadth and expansive nature of any life as a mother, as she is, even with the constraints. That's what Inchstones is here to do.
Yeah, I like that analogy as well. With just thinking about business, a lot that business can learn from that, in a sense of the growth and development of a business isn't the same. It's all contextual, and actually, it's not always about the grand milestones that you've done. There's a lot of the small nudges that we can do that help. Because I know you recently done a keynote for the Association of
Manufacturing Excellence.
That's the one. Yeah, thanks for helping me out.
Which is wild when you think about it. A special needs mom as a surprise and delight speaker.
Yes, that's
exactly the mismatch that we need to be talking about.
Yeah. So how did that go? And what was the response?
It was phenomenal. The feedback was great. And the title of my keynote, when I go into more of like an operational leadership setting, is Inchstones Intelligence and the Advantage of Adaptive Thinking. And that alone holds such weight, right? Because most organizational and operational leaders think, well, I do all of that. I'm sitting in the C-suite because I do that. And I challenge through the default assumptions around intelligence, who has intelligence, what intelligence looks like, how we recognize it in the workforce. And when it doesn't come in a linear way, and you accept that as a leader, you actually are creating a really powerful edge for yourself and your team. And the word accommodation is, I think, unfortunately weighted with a weakness. Like when you say something
negative,
accommodating, it's negative. It's seen as a weakness. And what example I share a lot is when I began implementing a visual schedule in my home for my two younger children, where it's simple. It's like, one long strip with some Velcro on it for my children. And this is when they were younger, but wake up, take off your pajamas, take off your pull up, get dressed, go into the bathroom, brush your teeth, use the restroom, and then we get downstairs for breakfast. Those 5 different Velcro pictures on a board really did wonders to help my children with a severe disability understand the process of what it takes to get ready, right? Full stop.
Yeah.
What that accommodation did was have my typical developing older child want one for herself. Well, that really helps Millie and Mac. Can I have one? And can mine be this color? And can I, all these different things that had to be made aesthetic for her. What that revealed to me is that the accommodation I made for children that have a developmental detriment per se ended up becoming that helped a typically developing child. So I challenged that when in my keynote with these operational leaders, saying, when you have someone that's asking for what looks like an accommodation, maybe reframe it in a way that it can actually be a competitive advantage for the entire team. Even though you think that we're doing something to accommodate a weakness, that weakness illuminates where the system has the ability to become stronger. And if you can shatter your assumption about what that accommodation does, it might end up becoming a way for faster, clearer, and more resiliency in the typical expectations you have for typical members of your team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. And it's right, isn't it? You as an organization, as a leader, you want to set the conditions so that
Yes.
your people can act.
Right.
And I think this whole linear thing and this sort of sheep dip thing we take in organizations all the time doesn't work. Actually, where we can think about, are there different ways, alternative ways that we could use to help people, to support them to act, because that's what we want.
Right.
Then why not?
I think, again, that comes down to one's orientation around some unconscious conditioning to adaptation and adaptive strategy. You know,
Yes.
if you are so tightly wound to an orientation and you are unable to evolve or broaden that, you will stay in a contained system of a vacuum, and those systems tend to die over time. It doesn't mean it's wrong in the moment. It might win in the moment. It will die over time. And that's why the vacuum of staying stagnant and not embracing a adaptive and reorientation to what what's the Mark Twain quote? It's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
What is that? We have to look that up before we post this
Yeah,
episode.
we do.
But that's truly it. It's what you're
Yes.
so sure of, that you're so sure of your model for leadership that you are unable to even contemplate that there is a better way to do something, even if that's
Yeah,
a 1% change.
And that's the thing. It's just that, organizations have that tension between status quo and change, and like you said, there needs to be an element of stability, but we can't get stagnant. We need to adapt. And the whole thing with reorientating is, if we get ourselves locked in so deeply into this ingrained way, like I said earlier, it limits what we can see, but it's even worse than that. We then start to only look for things to confirm our belief that what we
Correct.
already held to be true is true.
And
That's dangerous.
to go off of that, the most powerful thing you said is that you will get yourself in a silo where you will only be seeing and intaking things that validate that very specific orientation. And something that I said in my keynote over and over, and was mentioned afterwards to me, it is not unsafe to be uncomfortable. And that's something that is so powerful in the special needs parent world. And it translates into the business world and corporate America, as I say.
For America, yeah.
It is not unsafe to be uncomfortable, but somehow in the modern world, we have aligned emotional, neurological, nervous system discomfort with being unsafe. And that's the point that I continue to challenge across any industry, is that when you realize as a mother that your motherhood is not less worthy because of your children's diagnoses, it's just uncomfortable at first. It doesn't make it less worthy. It's just uncomfortable. Yet that orientation that it forced me to reorient. I'll be honest. If I did not have the children that I do, I likely would just be in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, lottie-dying and ladying who lunch with, my friends that are there. And no knock on them, because they're the best. They just haven't had the need or the functional life moment to force them to reorient. And then it is a choice.
Yeah, and that is the thing with humans, with organizations. There is that level of status quo that's just sort of given. Business is this, life is this is how things are structured. It's not until people start to reorientate and see opportunities, new ways, do they get to stretch people. But I think you're right about this idea of comfort or discomfort, and also this echo chamber. So I can imagine there's probably loads of mum groups with particular mum groups, or or husband dad groups and all this stuff that specialize, but sometimes they could become an echo chamber as well, which they sort of feed off each other, going it's right that we're doing this, rather than out of those and getting leaders to move out of that to say, right, what else is happening, what don't I know, what could I know, who else could I speak to, what other different perspectives can I look at to try and destroy your current orientation and build something new.
The OODA loop sketch is often misportrayed as a theoretical way to speed up progress or to
Yeah.
speed things up. And I know now through obviously my in-depth learning of that and understanding why orientation is not speed, but that it does drive effective decision making in really dynamic work environments and motherhood environments, that over time it does do what looks like speed. It looks speedy. When I have my children, disabled children are 11 or almost 11 and 8. So this is not, I don't want to ever share with leaders that this is something that they are going to take on a Friday and implement on a Monday. This is an integrative approach from your own orientation system that will permeate through your team, beginning with you as the leader.
Yeah.
And innovation and leadership does come down to letting go of those outdated models and metrics. You have to make space for that breakthrough, because if you don't, you are in a vacuum. And I was in
Yeah.
a vacuum in motherhood, thinking that I determined, Sarah determined what motherhood was going to look like. And, the universe said, hold my beer.
Yes.
I always say it's like the universe is like, oh, wait, you thought you were a great mother to that first and didn't touch the stove. Hold my beer. Hold it twice for me. And then I'll get back to you.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. But that's the thing. You can come as a leader, and I keep definitely as a strategic leader, and you look at, you can get locked in, and thinking that, what you're doing is fine and you're winning the game, you're shaping the game. But, you need to step back and to really look broader and think about, what is the information I'm getting fed?
Mm-hmm.
What is actually happening beyond what I believe to be true, and get out there and discover, because otherwise, before you know it, the world is shifted and changed and you haven't. And that's where you
That's
get that
right.
mismatch. Yeah. And you're not going to adapt then quick enough to
I know that
survive.
you are a military veteran, and one of the conferences I went on was for the United States Department of War, and it was, and I, as a neurodiversity advocate, autism advocate, I was really interested as to why the United States enlistment process did not include neurodiverse individuals. And I found through my research that, which I believe is like the number one army or, military in the world, the Israeli army actively recruits for men with ADHD.
Okay.
Why is that? Well, I believe that they've recognized that the orientation around people with a quote unquote ADHD, which is basically just a way that your brain is operating, your brain's operating system, allows for a specific skill set to emerge through your military training. The innate impulsivity and desire for like a high level of dopamine, right? Like the shock and awe of people with an ADHD brain, when in the right environment, does exactly what John Boyd's OODA loop asks of you and begs of you to do, is to reorient quicker and faster than your opponent.
Yes.
So that's what I find so interesting, in how this is so applicable beyond special needs mothers, why I get references to it from the military, why I get reference to it in business. It's so obvious when you realize that the adaptability comes from so many different angles, but specifically your internal operating system, your mind. It has to begin and end with you.
Yeah. And I keep saying to,
I have so many mothers, and I say this because that's obviously my platform and mission around mothers and caregivers, but even in organizational leadership, saying, well, how do I do that? Tell me how to do that. Well, I can't tell you how to do that. All I can do is model doing it and model what that evolution of my life looks like, in order for you to go, that's where it implements for me. Because if I want my child to go spend a full day in Disney World, that's a desire that I hold. You, Mike, in your family might not have that desire. I desire that because I have my genetic heritage of going once a year to Disney with my parents growing up, and going to Florida was a very big deal, and a continental road trip from Pennsylvania to Florida was a highlight of childhood. That's because of my orientation.
Yeah.
It might only be going to grandma's house down the street and having that adaptive place work for your family. That might be as big and broad as you want it to be, but I can't give that. I can only model it.
No. And that's what people have. Like, we talk about identity, and that's a lot of
Mhm.
John Boy's work about orientation. It comes out genetic heritage. So
Yes.
identity, it's the you. But when we're looking at that, many leaders, many organizations look at other organizations and go, oh, well, they're doing that, so we should be doing that. But it doesn't work that way. It's all about your dispositional state. So what, where are you right now? And also what is your identity?
Mhm.
And then from understanding that, you can go, well, what's our next step? Not next step to do what Sarah's doing or what everybody else is doing.
Mhm.
It's what is it that we need to do to maintain viability so that we are coupled with our external environment and we are viable. So we are changing, we're adapting, and we're
Well,
working well.
right. And how leaders form orientation comes down to how do they make sense of reality? Like, how does a
Yeah,
leader make sense of reality? Decide who they are as the leader within that reality, and then act accordingly. Because I think that, again, my children gave this to me. I believe it happened for me. They only know how to be 100% who they are. I can lead them to grow in ways that are going to be smaller and much more minuscule than what you might see as growth or anyone else might see as growth. But deciding and showing me truth and reality over and over and over again is one of the greatest gifts of why I can make sense of reality now. Does that, I know it's
no, that's
very convoluted, but it's like, this is real. Like, my hands right now are opening and shutting. That's real, right? Reality and orientation is in non-matter. And that's where that's where there's constant friction of, well, show me how. Tell me what decision should I make? What's the next thing I should do? What's the next right thing? I don't know. I can't tell you that. And it sounds so Eastern philosophical when you boil it down, because it's like, this like, well, it's always within you, and it actually is.
It is, yeah.
But the more in which you take in modeling of it from multiple different industries or competitors, you can then treat adaptation as a skill, like a technical skill. And then you're allowed to then reframe that in a way that it does challenge your identity practice, like the ongoing nature of letting go of outdated assumptions about what your team and an operational system needs to do, reshaping mental models, challenging others in a way that allows them to trust and follow you, not just align based on an identity, right? And that's
it's normally a false identity as well, because what you were saying is exactly about reality.
Yes.
There's always that perceptual complexity. What I view as reality will be different to what you see as reality, and so on. So the job is that we're trying to overcome that perceptual complexity, not to see exactly the same, but have some sort of coherence between the views. But we have to, we got to move this away from this point that there is only one way of seeing things. We all must have to be aligned around the same things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that simple, and we need to understand the difference between reality and what we think. Because often, how do leaders get to this point? Because often when I speak to leaders about organizations or themselves, they have this identity that they've created that is false.
Right. Well,
so it's false. How do you work from it?
I think that Boyd and the OODA loop, and for leaders, orientation is expressed through what do you notice first? What do you dismiss as noise? How does a leader explain failure in a team? What do you tolerate versus what do you correct? And that orientation, leaders cling to outdated mental models about productivity and compliance and how things have always been done. That stops adaptation. They don't think it does, because if they are getting monetary product success, they begin protecting themselves and protecting their orientation. And that's where innovation always slows down. Trust erodes the second that you are a leader that does not seek to grow, evolve, learn, crash your own mental models. You will erode trust. Period.
And that's the same with all the performance metrics, because people
like KPIs and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Because they focus
KPI
on that.
KPI is the worst acronym that has ever been on the history of this planet. I said what I said.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because they start to then look at that measure, but they're not realizing what's changing around them. So they're not working
It
towards an
hides a real
outcome.
problem. It hides real problems. That model, that metric, how do I say this? That metric depends on control instead of clarity.
Yes. Yeah. 'Cause I want people to understand what is it that, you can still have metrics on, but we really need to be clear about what is the outcome that we're trying to go. How do we know that we've been successful? Or we say in the military, when the smoke clears, what are we hoping to see meaningfully different? And if they don't understand that, they get blinded by a metric, and they may be wildly off what they're trying to do, but they don't have that clarity. They're just told, make that green, and I can make that green any
And
sort of
make
way.
that green now, right?
Yeah,
And make that
yeah.
green now. Instead of asking, why didn't we make that green? Maybe ask, what in our system made it harder to hit green?
Yeah.
What are we not seeing based on what we're measuring that did not let us hit green? Instead of why didn't we hit green? What in our system didn't allow for us to hit green? Because it's not just the metric, it's how the metric is formed. It shows up as leaders start asking those questions, like, what is it about our system? What are we not seeing? First of all, that shows a deep understanding and emotional intelligence around vulnerability. And vulnerability is, I know, can be seen in very two different camps, but in leadership, specifically around asking questions about systems, it is such a strength. It is such a strength, because teams are then given so explicitly from their leaders the ability to challenge an outdated metric, an outdated narrative, a workflow. I mean, again, workflows, and I always use KPI because it makes me laugh so hard. But like, there are so many dead KPIs that if your leader, if your manager, if your CEO can retire a KPI without getting defensive, you're in the right working world.
Yeah.
Defensiveness always shows where orientation is rigid.
Yeah. And I see it all the time I ask leaders, show me your strategy or what you're doing. And most of the time they'll bring out a balanced scorecard of all these later things. I'm okay. Well, but, and I see it with sort of the monthly business reviews or something. They have all their leaders there, and they'll go, "Oh, what's your metric? Oh, I'm green." Funny enough, there's a lot of greens on there. I was like, "Well, that doesn't reflect your overall performance, but yeah, okay, we'll go with the fact that they're greens." But they don't ask those questions. They don't have that. You call it vulnerability. I'll say like tactical humility to sit there and be challenged, but also to have those questions about. I love that. What are we not seeing?
What are we not seeing? What model no longer reflects reality, and what can we do to replace that?
Yes.
Again, to use my life, my mission as an example, if I had a chokehold on milestones and just went hell bent on like having my child hold a spoon and eat yogurt, I would become so obsolete, because that is not going to happen based on how typical education goes for a toddler who just learns through play. Right? Most children just learn through play. If I did that, I would be missing out on the fullness and whole developmental system of growth. That if anyone was actually watching me as a mother do that, they would shake their head thinking, she doesn't see it, right? She's not accepting her child for who they are. Yet when it becomes when you transform that into the organizational sense, there's less of this emotional attachment to the journey. And so people don't want to be as open about it and say, like, you can never say to a leader, gosh, you're not seeing this, are you? You're buckling down on things that, like, you're doing such a disservice to your team. Most leaders would take massive hit to that and say, who are you to say? Right? But because they're not asking, what can I replace that metric with in order to destroy and create a new in practice.
And I can't imagine it being a comfortable place for someone to challenge the senior exec team that have just been away for the weekend on an offsite, and they've come back with this new vision and purpose of who they are.
Mhm.
And all the people in the organization are looking, going, we're not that. Yeah. We're not that. That's ridiculous.
Right.
Where we need to have that space to challenge our own, otherwise it's that mismatch between reality and what we believe. And if you get into that place where your orientation is becomes so mismatched with reality,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to be in a dangerous place where you do not have free independent action.
I'm going to start using tactical humility. That's a effing brilliant combination of words, because vulnerability is operational. I really do believe it is. And the willingness to admit what you don't know yet and to acknowledge that a model no longer fits, to stay present when an answer might not be clear, and to be seen as a leader learning in real time alongside. I think that vulnerability is what allows leaders to stay oriented to reality instead of simply protecting their ego to their role. Because I mean, ego is just control. Ego is doubling down. Ego is defensiveness, and ego will become, as a group of leaders that I work closely with say, the self-licking ice cream cone. Right?
Yeah.
It's just like it's dripping you like it, and you're not doing anything. What are you destroying? You're not even letting the ice cream even model anything or even being worth having any substance. You're just protecting the drip. And that's what becomes of leaders in those roles that don't. It's so simple. It's almost Socratic. Ask better questions.
Yeah. And I love that question. And I urge leaders to do it in the next sort of review meeting that they have. Ask people, what is it do you think I'm not seeing?
Mm-hmm.
I think that will just open up such a fascinating conversation.
Or what assumption did I make that was wrong? Instead of like,
yeah.
They failed or I failed. What assumption did I make? What did I presume to be true that was not over time?
Because I can't, and you've been great with this as well, and I can't overstate how important orientation is.
Yeah.
To anyone, really.
Yeah.
I mainly focus on business, but for a strategic thinker, orientation is vital. To understand your orientation is crucial because, as I said before, it limits what you can see. So if you can understand that, then you can have that humility to speak to other people. What do they see? What's their orientation? And what's the difference between my orientation, my belief of the world, and yours?
I would challenge and push back on that just a smidge, because I don't believe. I know orientation is not what you see. It's how you make sense of what you see.
Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, with that.
Because
what I was on about in the action.
Yes, two leaders can observe like the same set of data and act very, very differently based on their own mental models, right? So it's always about making sense of what you're seeing, right? Because if again, the motherhood that I have, typical child going about, I was being affirmed by what I saw because society never challenged me to make sense of that. I was given the plan that worked for my child. So it was like, great, I'm being affirmed along the entire process. But if that didn't make sense to my other two children, so I had to broaden and expand my orientation, and it determined what felt obvious, what felt urgent, and what also becomes invisible to most, right? It's like what leaders often ignore is more telling than what they actually respond to.
Yeah.
And again, we all do it. I never want to come across as like you or I being these holy grails of orientation. It's not. It's just saying that I have to do that too. I have to see, well, what am I ignoring here?
Yeah.
Right. And if orientation is how I make sense of what I see in the reality, then it's also shaped by my experiences, the incentives that I'm given to see things one way, the culture and the identity. And it's not neutral. It's never neutral.
No.
And even saying that is very freeing, I think, as a leader to your organization. If it's misaligned, if your orientation is misaligned, you're not going to be able to model what it means to make sense of reality. So if will come to you if you're, if you're a leader and you've got a team of 10 below you, if they are not comfortable in sharing with you what they see and how they interpret what they see, you are going to be missing out on expansive nature of what is possible because of the limitation that you put in to what is allowed to be seen.
Seen,
Right?
yeah. And that, I guess my point, and I think that's the perceptual complexity of everything, is that a lot of people just assume that because it's what they make sense of, it's because what they see, that's what everybody else sees.
Mhm.
And that just because I've communicated it in this way, that the way that I've communicated it is how it's being perceived. I didn't
Mhm.
realize that we all see things differently. We all make sense of things in a slightly different way.
Mhm.
And we'll see different elements of the darkness that you can't see. So actually stopping and acknowledging that and
Yes.
realizing that, yeah, I've got my orientation, but there's always going to be limits to that.
Yes.
And
And I think that, to use your brilliant phrase, tactical humility is how orientation stays connected to reality,
yes, that's awesome.
because you are tactically humble. You are saying that I, as a leader, am willing to update my system, my orientation, to expand that reality for the greater organization, which is another system that we're in, right? There's our own system, but then there's the role, and then there's the whole organization. Everyone has its own orientation. But
Yeah,
when you're a leader, you do get to command the reorientation process. And it's so expansive when you lock into that. It's such a beautiful aha moment when I see leaders realize this. They're like, oh my gosh. And you think once you see it, you can't unsee it, right?
yes, yeah.
Once you see it, you
Once you
really can't.
understand it. Well, that's the
Yes.
misconception that you mentioned earlier with Boyd's work. People look at it as very one-dimensional. It's about speed. But
Yes.
once you understand it, it is that aha moment, and you can't unsee it. And it just opens up a whole world that is just absolutely fascinating and really important. And once you understand it, it makes sense to how we view the world, how we make sense of the world, and how easily it is to get detached from that reality.
A line that I've said a few times that might land is, you can't out decide a misaligned orientation. You can't,
Yeah.
like, I can't say to my kids, I have 3 typical children and we are going to do this. We are going to all get in the car without any support, and we're going to walk out. It's icy outside. It's really icy outside and it's really cold. And we're going to walk into the car and you're going to buckle yourself and we're going to get there and we are going to go to the movies tonight. I can't that decision cannot out decide that misaligned orientation to reality. That will not.
Yeah.
We will fall apart the first step out the front door. And I have a dark humor. Like, I can laugh at that because I'm picturing this in my. I just came up with that. Like, I'm picturing that in my mind. Like, I mean, we'd be rolling in the street. Someone would get hit by a car within 30 seconds. That's the truth. But that points to, like, you can't decide. You can't out decide a misaligned orientation to reality. You just can't.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Chasing speed over sense making is such a mismatch.
Yes.
It's the anti-Boydian theory.
Yeah, and that's so true, because many of my clients that listen to this will know me and probably have horror visions in their heads with me saying, like, stop trying to solutionize, stop trying to decide, understand first. You must understand the situation first. Sense make.
Sense making.
Yes.
Urgency is not clarity. Whatever internal reward you get from a reaction or a praise that does not align with learning is actually a false, that's a fake positive. That's not real. Yeah. That's not a real, that's fleeting, and it will not land. And it's just your body's way of giving, again, it's fast dopamine. It's a quick dopamine hit. It's almost like a drug. I mean, not to go into some really heavy topics, but that me and my partner talk about all the time, is that leadership that acts without constantly reorienting is like working for a addict
Yeah.
who only knows that this hit is going to get them X feeling.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's dark. It's very dark, but it's
Yeah.
really like there's certain leaders that can resemble, if you peel back all the layers, it can resemble an addict because
Yeah.
they are so convinced that the only way in which to get a result is to get this to hit, that to hit, that to hit in that order always.
Yeah. And you see it all the time because as soon as things start going wrong, they just want quick decisions, and you're thinking you've not even understand the problem yet.
Yeah.
So all you're doing is becoming more and more mismatched. Just before we leave, is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners to go away and think about from this episode?
Well, I love what you were saying just now, and this is definitely a wonderful way to capstone this, is that Boyd never did not say to make decisions quickly or to be speedy with your decisions. What he showed is that quick decisions emerge naturally when your orientation is very well shaped to reality. And I think that to understand environment, intent, and constraints is such an incredibly simple yet powerful way to really challenge and beg of leaders to expand their orientation. Because it's not only going to work for your system in your company, in your career, it's going to work everywhere. And I think that's what the greatest of leaders can take away from Boyd is that the way that most organizations interpret orientation can become the fuel for which they thrive in the long haul through the speed with which our society is changing and evolving.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's definitely good to go about. And this is what I love about these conversations, because typically if you have a strategy podcast, you'd get so-called strategists, atypical strategists, you would say, on the call. But I always find a lot of them don't really add anything new. But it's been fascinating, and I think that your perspective and where you've come from is so non-traditional, but it's enlightening, and I think there's a lot of generals out there that could probably have you sat next to them, teaching them actually what it is about being aligned.
I have sat by some U.S. Navy SEALs and have challenged them. I said, "You get to deploy home. I do not. Take that.
Yeah, true.
Take that, and just remember that
True.
you got to go back home to Paris Island. I don't. I'm frontline parenting through this without a break, and it is a beautiful life that I get to live, and it's happening for me. Is frontline to the nth degree, and I do believe that once I learned the theories of John Boyd, it all actually clicked in the most beautiful of ways.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. This was a wonderful conversation, and I hope it creates a wonderful reflection amongst your listeners.
Yeah, no doubt it will. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Fantastic.
Thank you.